So it is my distinct pleasure to finally get the opportunity to introduce you to our speakers tonight. Mark Whitacre is a longtime friend of the CBMC ministry, and you'll hear part of that story tonight. Mark, you're still leading CBMC teams in your hometown of Cincy, aren't you? Mark was our chief operating officer for CBMC until just recently, but he has got a story that I think is going to inspire us tonight. It's going to challenge us. Maybe even entertain us in parts. He's just a neat guy, but I don't think I'm stealing your story when I tell you that he's here tonight with his wife Ginger, and so that's going to be a treat for all of us. They have known each other since 7th and 8th grade, is that right? Started doing proms together in 10th grade or something? Yeah, 40 years of marriage, and if you hear Mark tell this story, he'll tell you that it's a miracle that Ginger stayed with him. And I think when you hear the story tonight, you might agree. But I'm going to let them tell that story. I'm going to just introduce you right now. Folks, please welcome Mark and Ginger Whitacre.
Thank you for that warm welcome. It's great to be here in Oklahoma City. And first time I was here, I think, to speak and share was during the prayer breakfast, the 27th annual prayer breakfast 10 years ago. I remember I did the first one in 2009. It was in Raleigh, North Carolina. And the guy who discipled me and actually led me to Jesus is the guy that had me as their speaker there in 2009, May of 2009. It was National Prayers Day. And he asked me to come up and speak at the prayer breakfast. He had about 800 people in Durham, North Carolina. And I said, I'm only doing this because of you. This is a tough story to share. There's a lot of poor decision making in this story. So I told him I was only going to do this event just for him in 2009. I was never going to do it again. And so I did that event for him in 2009. It was May of 2009. And then shortly after that, I did the prayer breakfast here 10 years ago, the one at the 27th annual prayer breakfast, the large prayer breakfast you guys have at the convention center. I was the speaker there. And I said, I'm only going to do it one more time. That's all I'm going to do. And I've been doing it 70 or 80 times a year. Tonight, Ginger and I track them on our phone, our tracker when I do them. It's actually 793 times I've done it in 11 years. 793. So the guy named Ian Howes who discipled me says, Mark, I thought you were only going to do it one time and never do it again. Well, that's God had different plans. And the amazing thing is when I was at Cornell University, I was getting my PhD in biochemistry. I was 22 years old as a PhD student, finished at 25. And I remember telling all these other students, and some of them even bring it up today, all these 30 years later. And I tell these students, I say, I'm getting a PhD in biochemistry because I never want to be on stage. I never want to have to speak in front of an audience. I don't like to travel at all. And I said, that's why I'm going to get a PhD in biochemistry. And here, all these years later, that's all I do. So it's amazing God's plan versus our own plans. So thanks for having me. We're great to be here. I've been here about a dozen times since then, since 10 years ago, speaking in Oklahoma City. It's great to have Ginger with me this time. It's her first time here. She's going to come up and share. So I'm going to abbreviate my testimony a little bit compared to what I normally do. But I want to give enough of the story where I think you'll have some good questions when Ginger comes up. But this story started when I was 32 years old. That was 5 years ago, by the way, when that story started. That was 30 years ago. I'm 62 years old now, and that's when this journey really started for us. And you hear the words servant leadership versus selfish leadership, and you hear those words a lot. Boy, the story I'm going to tell you started off with a selfish leader. There's no doubt about it. I was 32 years old. I was divisional president in one of the largest companies in the world. I think they're the 41st largest company in America today. They were the 56th largest company on the Fortune 500 when I joined them. Their name is Archer Daniels Midland. ADM is the company name. And that's when Ginger and I were living in Decatur, Illinois when I joined them as divisional president. And I was responsible for the biotech division, things that would go into beverages and breakfast cereals and things of that sort. It'd be difficult to buy a food in the grocery store that doesn't have something from ADM in it, one of the largest food additive companies in the world. If you're buying an iced tea or you're buying a Kellogg cereal or you're buying a Coca-Cola or a Sprite, any kind of beverage or an orange juice, it's got something from ADM in it. Again, one of the largest food additive companies in the world. And we had 30,000 people like they have now, 30,000 employees. The CEO was 75 years old, our president was 69 years old, and I was divisional president reporting right to the president, and I was 32. I was the number 4 ranked executive at the company when I joined them in 1989, when they hired me where I was senior vice president of another company before that. And I remember when they hired me, the first week, the CEO comes back to my office. It's October 1989 in Decatur, Illinois, about 3 hours south of Chicago. And the CEO came back to my office and he said, Mark, the 7 top executives each get their own jet, their own Falcon 50. You're number 4 ranked executive. This is my first week at ADM. He said, this is your, you're number 4 ranked executive in the company, and we're going to assign 2 pilots to you, and you having a Falcon 50 assigned to you. I'm telling you, I thought I was Justin Bieber. I did. And I had blonde hair blowing in the wind and all that back there at age 32. But here I had a corporate jet, 32 years old, and I said, look out, Bon Jovi, here I come. That's what I was thinking back that time in our life. And boy, I was kind of full of myself in high school, and by this time I was really getting full of myself to have this jet and to have a 75-year-old CEO and a 69-year-old president. I'm only 32, and I'm number 4 ranked executive. I'm thinking, well, there's only 3 people above me, and they're like double to triple my age. There's plenty of room to move up as time went on. So that was my first week. Now the third week came about, and CEO came back to my office, a 75-year-old guy, and he said, Mark, you moved your family yet to Decatur, Illinois? And we lived in Frankfurt, Germany at the time, working for another big chemical company over there. And I said, no, I'm not moved yet. We're looking at houses. It's only my 3rd week here. To move from Germany is a pretty big move, and 3 young children and so on. Lived in Frankfurt for 4 years, so we're pretty established over there. And so I said it'd probably take us another month or 2, but we're looking at homes. He said, why don't you buy my home? I said, well, tell me a little about your home. And he said, well, it's not that big. It's 13,000 square feet home. It's got an 8-car garage. It's got 3 golf greens on the property. It's got living quarters for your security guards. I didn't have any security guards, but thought maybe someday I'd need them. Actually, after what I went through, I definitely needed them. And then he said, it's got horse riding stables where your kids ride, an inside arena. Decatur's cold, but there'd be an inside arena where it's warm when they ride their horses in the wintertime. And I'm hearing all this, and I'm thinking, boy, that sounds like, for a guy 7 years out of college, that sounds like quite a home. And I said, I think that's a little bit too much for me. And he said, nonsense. He said, I want you to buy my home. He's been there 30 years. He's 75 years old, wanted to move to something smaller. It was the original home of John Daniels, who founded Archer Daniels Midland 115 years earlier. This house was built in 1846. Beautiful mansion, 15 acres, big columns and the whole bit, like kind of going to the wind type home. And I said, I just don't think I can do it. I said, I'm 7 years out of college. This is my 3rd week at work. He said, no, I give you a $500,000 startup bonus today. He said, I own most of the banks in Decatur, Illinois. I can get you a good interest rate at the bank. I think we should have went to prison just for some of that. And so anyway, I bought his home my 3rd week at work. So I had a corporate jet my 1st week, and boy, did I really think I was Bon Jovi then. To live in this mansion, I moved Ginger from Frankfurt, Germany, and moved into this big home and 3 golf greens and horse riding stables, inside riding stables and the whole bit. So that's the home we moved into and lived for almost 8 years in that home. And the whole time I was thinking I was Bon Jovi living in that home. Well, what's a 32-year-old do that's full of himself with an 8-car garage? You fill it up. So my salary and bonuses, about 90% of my income during that time was in bonuses and typical public company with stock options and things of that sort. And I worked there 8 years, and it was into 7 figures every year for 8 years. And this is 1989 in the 7 figures. So you could imagine what that today, it'd probably be 8 or 9, 10 million today, what that 2 or 3 million a year was during that time. So when you're making $200,000 or $300,000 a month between your salary and bonuses, I filled that garage up. I mean, within a couple months, I had a Ferrari. I was watching Magnum PI during that time. So I had to have his Ferrari, not his exact one, but the same kind he has. So I bought me the red Ferrari with a black snap-off top, the GTS 348, and 2 Mercedes, 2 BMWs. Within 5 or 6 months, I had $2 million of cars in that 8-car garage. So it was, like I said, this is an example of selfish leadership. Definitely what I'm describing. So the whole time I'm driving these cars, a $250,000 Ferrari with the top snapped off and the whole bit, and then going to the airport and getting on my Falcon 50, The whole time I'm doing that, Ginger's driving around a 10-year-old Wrangler Jeep. Those cars didn't mean anything to her at all. I said, Ginger, you can drive any one of these cars in the garage you want. Matter of fact, I'll buy you any car. I'm making $300,000 a month. Tell me what kind of car you want, I'll buy you anything you want. She said, Mark, I like my Jeep. She said, my Jeep is fine, and I'm just going to drive it till it doesn't run anymore, then I'll get something else. 10-year-old Jeep she was driving. So as I was getting obsessed with moving up the ladder in corporate America and getting obsessed with greed and compensation and things of that sort, that self-centeredness, Ginger was getting obsessed with Jesus. She became a Christian years before me, and she was heavy in going to our church and heavy in Bible study groups with other women outside of Decatur, Illinois, where we lived during that time. And she was getting obsessed with God and with Jesus. And I thought, as long as she's happy and as long as she's busy and I can keep doing what I'm doing, we're fine. So I had no problem with her that. And she said, one thing I want you to do, Mark, is go to church with me. So I'd go to church with her every Sunday and our 3 children. And I kind of thought, if you go to church, you're a Christian. So I thought I was a Christian because I was going to church. But I can tell you, I wasn't listening to one word that pastor had to say. I was just sitting in those pews. Matter of fact, my parents are Christians, and were Christians even as I was growing up, and they forced me to go to church. And I didn't listen to one thing he was saying during that time. When I'm sitting there with Ginger in church during the 1980s and 1990s, during this 8 years I was with ADM, all I was thinking about, where's the next big deal I'm going to do, what kind of bonus I'm going to get out of it, and what I'm going to buy next, is all I thought. I think I could have got to the level of Bill Gates, and it would not have been enough during that time in my life. So let's fast forward a little bit. Now, 3 years now at the company, totally obsessed with the company, totally entrenched with the company. The CEO comes back to my office, and the vice chairman is there, and they said, Mark, we're going to start teaching you how ADM does business. You're part of the family now. You know, we're heading towards 80 years of age now. We're going to start teaching you how ADM does business. So they started sharing with me some things that I didn't know before, how they were doing business. But I tell you, I was so obsessed and so addicted to that conversation, I was going to do whatever they wanted me to do. And I think they knew that I wanted to move up so much in that company that I would do whatever it takes to continue to move up. And they knew that. They knew they had me. So they would keep paying me, but they had me doing some things that were a little different. I'm going to talk about that here in a minute. And so Ginger, fast forward 7 months later, and by the way, I met Ginger when she was in, as Brent said, 7th grade and 8th grade. We met in the school band, high school band. Then we went proms together in high school. We were homecoming king and queen. I was senior class president. She was treasurer of her class. We were gifted students. But I tell you, the difference is Ginger was really about serving others. And even in high school, maybe not as much as I was at ADM, but even at that time, I was still thinking about, boy, how can I get all the education I can get? And just and all about me and move up the corporate ladder. I had full scholarships to go Ohio State University, got a bachelor's and master's from Ohio State in Columbus, Ohio, got a PhD in biochemistry from an Ivy League school, Cornell in New York. Went 8 years to college. My parents didn't have to pay one dime for my college. I was the only child out of 4 to go to college, out of four children in our family, and my parents said I went and got a degree for all of them during that time. But the difference is I didn't use this education and didn't think of this education, how I can make society a better place when I leave society compared to when I came in. I thought about this education as, boy, I'm going to make a lot of money having an Ivy League PhD from Cornell University. And it's amazing, myself and some of the other PhD students at Cornell, we would talk about that we'd say, hey, we're going to make millions of dollars with this education. And the interesting thing is we all did, but we all have broken lives. We were focusing on the wrong thing. We were focusing on what it's going to do for us and how much compensation we're going to get. And instead of focusing on, like a servant leader would, how can we make the world a better place? We had the wrong focus. And like I said, all of us ended up broken in different ways because we did have the wrong focus. So 7 months with the company, I'm kind of fast forwarding now. Ginger set me down. It's November 5th, 1992, and you're going to have some questions about this when she comes up for sure. And she said, Mark, what's going on with your life? And I said, Ginger, we live in a mansion, flying around on a corporate jet. Our kids go to schools that cost $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a year, all 3 of them in private schools. One went to Culver Academy in Culver, Indiana, about $25,000 a year back then. Our son went to Brim Prep School in Carbondale, Illinois, about $40,000 a year back then. These were Ivy League schools, and they were in high school. And that's what we were paying during. I said, our kids go to the best schools. I said, Ginger, if there's a heaven, this is it. And Ginger said, Mark, I can tell you this is not heaven. I said, well, what do you mean? She said, Mark, I think you're an addict. I said, an addict, Ginger? I said, I never drank. I've never used drugs. All I do is work. She said, exactly. She said, you work from the minute you get up till the minute you go to bed. I said, Ginger, 90% of my income is on bonuses and stock options. If I meet certain performance parameters, it's how I earn the difference between a 6-figure salary and a 7-figure salary. That's how you do it. She said, you know what, Mark? I'd rather have 2 Fords in the driveway and a 2,000 square foot house and have my husband back. She said, you're not who I fell in love with in high school. So this was getting to be a pretty difficult discussion during this time in 1992. 3 years with the company at that point. And then she said, Mark, something's changed the last 7 months that you've been there. She said, I've known you since the 8th grade. The last 7 months, something's weighing on your shoulders and something's changed. And I said, well, Ginger, the last 7 months, I'm just sharing with someone I've known since junior high. I said, the last 7 months, they now have me learning about the cartel and how to manage the international cartel because I'm part of the family now. And she said, what do you mean manage a cartel? What does that mean? I said, well, basically the ingredients that go into all of your foods, that we're fixing the prices of those ingredients. In our $70 billion company we were earning an extra billion, not $1 million, but an extra $1 billion a year with price fixing of ingredients that go into your foods. Like a lactic acid that goes into a Campbell soup, like a citric acid that goes into a beverage, like a high fructose corn syrup that goes into about everything, that we're fixing prices of these ingredients and we earn an extra $1 billion a year. So they're teaching me how to do this. So I'm busy. That's why I'm on the phone at night because a lot of our competitors are Southeast Asia, Japan and Singapore and South Korea. So 8 o'clock at night in Decatur, Illinois is 8 o'clock in the morning the next day in Southeast Asia. So I have to be on the phone at night. And that's why you see some differences these last 7 months. And she said, Mark, is that legal? I said, well, it's not legal. But I said, they told me everybody does it. They've been doing it for 12 years. And if you're in a commodity business like we're in, you have to do it. This is what you have to do to be in the commodity business. She goes, boy, Mark, I don't know if I like that. She said, well, who pays this extra $1 billion a year? Is it the beverage companies? Is it Kellogg's? I said, well, they're buying the ingredients, but they really have their profit margins spilled in. So they pass it on to the consumer. So everybody who goes to the grocery store is paying for that. And we have plants in Asia, Latin America, Europe, United States. So about anybody who goes to the grocery store around the world, we're getting a little bit from them when they go to the grocery store from this price fixing. She said, you mean my grandma on $200 a week Social Security is paying for this and we live in a mansion with an 8-car garage? She said, boy, Mark, I don't know if I can live with this. I said, Ginger, if I'm going to move up in this company, continue at this company, they have 30,000 employees. They could easily replace me. They could easily even get someone from a different company to replace me, but this is what we're going to have to do if we're going to survive in this company. She said, I don't know, Mark, I got to pray through this. And I tell you what, when she told me that, nothing ever turned good for me when she said she was going to go pray about it. Nothing. There was not one thing when she said she was going to pray about it that I thought was going to turn out good with that. So she went back in her study and she prayed a couple hours, November 5th, 1992, which was a life-changing moment for us, for sure, 28 years ago. And she came back out after praying for a couple hours. She said, Mark, God led me to a decision. I said, good, put it over with, get it over with. I got price-fixing calls to make. It's almost 7 or 8 o'clock now. I got price-fixing calls to make to Southeast Asia. She said, no, God led her to a decision. And she said, God led me to turn you into the FBI. I said, Ginger, you turn me into the federal authorities, I could go to prison for price fixing. Antitrust laws, it's illegal. You could go to prison for it. I said, the CEO is best friends with President Clinton. He's on the phone on a regular basis with President Clinton. He flew to President Nixon's funeral on President Clinton's plane. He's a billionaire that's been there for 30 years, the largest shareholder of the 56th largest company in America. They will kill us. They will squish us. We can't survive this if we turn. I'm more worried about them than going to prison. She said, you know what, Mark, my CEO is bigger than your CEO. I said, Ginger, who is your CEO? And she said, my CEO is Jesus. I said, Ginger, I can't see Jesus. I can't feel him. I can't touch him. but my CEO lives 7 miles down the road. He's a billionaire, and he would squish us and kill us. We could never survive it. She said, well, God's going to protect us. You're going to turn yourself in, and we're going to do it within the hour, and if you don't do it, I'm doing it for you. So within an hour, I've known her since she was in 7th grade, and I know when she says something, she means something. Within an hour, we're sitting in front of the FBI for 4 hours. I don't know how many of you ever went to the FBI and told them you're stealing $1 billion a year, but it's an interesting reaction. I can tell you. The phone reached Janet Reno, the Attorney General at the time. William Sessions, who was director of the FBI right before Louis Freeh, it reached him. This became the largest white-collar price-fixing case in U.S. history, a $1 billion theft for 12 years in a row. 11 companies each getting $1 billion a year for 12 years, 11 different companies, $1 billion theft each for 12 years in a row. Started by a stay-at-home mom raising 3 young children who started that case. So we're sitting in front of the FBI, and I'm thinking, boy, I gotta really get myself out of this. I gotta really start talking slick here. So the FBI said, now tell me a little bit about what's going on. Ginger's sitting there with me. I said, it's really not much. It's not really much to talk about. And he said, well, how big is this case? What's going on? What kind of theft? What's going on? I said, it's really not that much. I don't think it's worth our time talking about. And Ginger said, he told me it was $1 billion. And the FBI said, $1 million? And she said, no, $1 billion. He said, $1 billion theft? And then he said, now how long has this been going on? I said, it's not really been going on that long. It's not really much worth talking about. It's kind of just started. He told me an hour ago it's been going on for 12 years. He should have just interviewed Ginger and left me out of it. So that went on for 4 hours, and at the end of those 4 hours, we had the choice to either be arrested, because I confessed to a $1 billion crime, or become an informant the next day. And that's how I became an informant wearing a wire for the FBI. They said, if you wear a wire to go after the kingpins, has been doing it for 12 years, you've only been doing it for 7 months. So it's the perfect time you wear a wire for us and help go after the kingpins of this case. And that's the difference between a whistleblower and an informant. A whistleblower is someone who sacrifices everything to do the right thing. That's Ginger. An informant is someone who's sitting in front of the FBI, and you have a choice to either wear a wire or go to prison. And I thought wearing a wire looked a lot more attractive. So that's how I wore a wire. I met the FBI at 6 o'clock the next morning after we confessed. They shaved my chest. They put 2 microphones on my chest. They had a tape recorder on my back. They had another tape recorder in a briefcase. They had a 3rd tape recorder in a notebook, 3 different tape recorders, because in case one didn't work, they wanted to make sure they captured this huge white-collar crime that was occurring. And they said, only about 6 weeks, Mark. You'll wear this wire for 6 weeks, and that's all. Wear it 9, 10 hours a day, 6 weeks, and it's over with. They wired me up at 6 o'clock every morning for 3 years. Monday through Friday, 1992 to 1995. You go to the FBI museum today, it has all the equipment I wore undercover as the longest duration of anybody wear a wire in history. It wasn't 6 weeks, it was for 3 long years, 10 hours a day for 3 years. I lost 60 pounds during that time wearing a wire. People in the company thought I had cancer because I was so sick and so falling apart, knowing what was going on and knowing that I had going up against one of the most powerful CEOs in the world. As a matter of fact, when the FBI wired me up, and many times Ginger heard it when they wired me up, they said, Mark, if these guys catch you, they're going to kill you. This is serious stuff. And to hear that 2 or 3 times a week and to wear that wire 10 hours a day for 3 years was an experience I don't recommend to anybody. So that record is a record of wearing one for 3 years, and I don't recommend any of you to go out and try to break that record. Don't do it. You don't want to be wearing a wire. You don't want to be an FBI informant, that's for sure. But I look back and I look at some of the highest integrity guys I ever worked with in my life with those 4 FBI agents. I look back, and we're friends with them today. Even a couple years ago, Ginger and I even went with vacation with one of the FBI. I've done 7 events, speaking at FBI events, including Quantico FBI Academy I spoke at. They become our biggest supporters because they appreciate so much that I wore that wire every day for 3 years. So now all of a sudden, I want to mention one thing about a green lamp. There was a green lamp, and this green lamp looks like it came from a yard sale. They knew they were going up against one of the largest companies in the world during that time. So they wanted to make sure they captured this case up on video. So there was this green lamp, looks like it came from a yard sale, and I would tell the FBI where the meetings are taking place, and they would make sure that green lamp got in the room. If the meeting was overseas, they would talk to the Interpol, they would talk to the U.S. Embassy, and they'd make sure they changed the voltage to get it from 110 to 220 and all the things they had to do, like if it was in Europe or Asia. And they would get that green lamp in that room, and they would be in the next conference room, and they could monitor and control that video camera in that lamp. So whoever's talking, they would zoom in that person because they wanted the jury to see this crime. This was a 7-week trial in one of the biggest trials in Chicago at that time. Almost 30 people went to prison on this case, 4 people from ADM alone. So this green lamp was following us around the world. First place, it was Shangri-La Hotel in Singapore. 11 guys sitting around a room. The green lamp 5 feet from them, no further from me than that table, the green lamp. Video camera just videoing all the 11 guys as they're peeking that conference room. 2 weeks later, the same 11 guys were sitting at the Mandarin Hotel in Hong Kong. Same green lamp. Same 11 guys, 5 feet from them. 3 or 4 weeks after that, same 11 guys having our next price-fixing meeting. We're in Four Seasons Hotel in Chicago. That green lamp was with the same 11 guys 2 or 3 times a month for 3 years. 5 feet from them. No matter what room, no matter what hotel, what country. And I look back 30 years ago and I say, thank God we did not have a woman criminal among us. Because if we had a woman criminal among us, I would have been dead. Because a woman would have said, that green lamp is following us around the world. But when you got 11 greedy guys that are getting millions of dollars of bonuses as a result of what we're doing, they didn't see what was 5 feet from them until there was a 7-week trial in Chicago and that green lamp was brought in to show the jury how the videotapes were obtained. Then they all hit their head. Now I remember the green lamp. And I remember one of the tapes that helped convict everybody. It was an Atlanta meeting. There used to be a Sheraton Hotel. It's no longer there. And this is 1993, a Sheraton Hotel by the Atlanta airport. And this green lamp was rolling. I had all the tape recorders getting the audio on me that were on me. The video was coming from the lamp. We're in Atlanta, Georgia. Someone knocked on the hotel door where we're having our price-fixing meeting. Green lamp 5 feet from us. And one of the guys, and this was the tape that had most impact convicting everybody. One of the guys in the meeting, one of the defendants, said, oh my gosh, it's the FBI. And another one said, oh my gosh, we're all going to jail. And then another one said, the FBI is so stupid they could never catch something this sophisticated. All that got on tape. That was played to a jury, and you could see the jury's faces that convictions were happening after that. You could see it, and it didn't take long to get convictions on everybody when that went to jury after the 7-week trial. So after wearing a wire, risking my life, they gave me a 6 months, a Martha Stewart sentence, white-collar camp, no fence, a 6 months plea agreement. Mark, you sign this, you're going to prison for 6 months. Deal of a lifetime. My lawyer calls me in Chicago. Ginger's by my side as always, said, Mark, 6 months. The other guys are going to go to prison for several years. You're going for 6 months. This is a deal of a lifetime for everything you've done for us. And I said, I don't know if I can go to prison for 6 months. I don't know if I can do it. Mark, you got to take this plea agreement. If you don't take this, you're going to go to prison for several years. You've got to sign this plea agreement. I looked at Ginger, and I said, I don't know if I can do it, Ginger. And she said, sign it, Mark. Let's put it behind us. And then I looked at her, and I said, Ginger, you've not been the one to wear a wire for 3 years. You're the one that got me in this mess in the first place. And I ripped that plea agreement up in her face and said, because you want me to do it, I'm not going to do it. And I fired that lawyer on the spot, who's now a judge, who recommended that 6-month sentence. And the FBI agents worked hard for that 6-month sentence. I fired the lawyer, hired a whole group of lawyers the next day, went through the courts, went through all the trials, fought through case, trial after trial, month after month, for 3 years to get an 8.5-year sentence instead, 3 years later. So instead of going to prison at age 40, by the time the case went through trials, I would have got out 6 months later at age 40. I went in at age 40 and got out at age 49. All of my 40s in prison because of that one decision. I was my own worst enemy every step of the way. I showed Ginger, didn't I? I said, I'm going to show you what I'm tearing off this 6-month sentence. I showed her. So that's how I got an 8.5-year sentence, by not taking responsibility, by going through the courts, by going through trials. And one of the worst decisions I've ever made in my life. The worst decision I ever made was to get involved with price fixing in the first place. when they offered me that and gave me a big $100,000 bonus and 25,000 shares of stock, I should have walked away. But that was almost $1 million right there that day, and I wasn't willing to walk away from it. So that's when I got involved with price fixing that day, when they gave me $1 million worth of bonuses, and I should have walked away. That would have been the right decision to make, but I didn't. I was too obsessed and too addicted to greed to do that. So now I have an 8.5-year sentence to do. I pulled my car in one of those garages, and I tried to kill myself. I wrote a 17-page letter to Ginger and my kids, and I said, I can't do 8.5 years in prison. I can't do it. And I tried to kill myself. I was hopeless and helpless during that time. I was hospitalized for a month. I was treated in the hospital for post-traumatic stress disorder. Some of the things would happen when you were wired 10 hours a day for 3 years. I was treated for that. The judge gave me 7 months to get back on my feet before I had to go to prison to get my house in order. And all I thought about when I came out of the hospital was, I'm going to find a way to kill myself and make it work this next time. I got 7 months to do it, is what I thought during that time. Well, I come out of the hospital, I'm home, got 7 months before I go to prison. I'm definitely a train wreck by that point in my life, knowing I'm going to be going the next 8.5 years to prison. And there's a guy reading about all this in the newspapers. His name is Ian Howes. And he was in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. That's where we live. You couldn't stay in Decatur, Illinois when you're testifying against the top executives of the largest company that's in Decatur, Illinois. So we ended up moving to Chapel Hill, kind of a safe place for us. And we had some friends there and family there. And that's where we ended up living during that time. And this guy in Chapel Hill was reading about it in the USA Today. It was a high-profile case during that time. And he was reading about all this. And he showed up at my house. His name's Ian Howes. And I didn't know who he was. He said he was part of CBMC, and I thought, CNBC? I thought it was the news, someone asking for questions for the media. I had no idea who he was. He was CFO of a pharmaceutical company also. And he said, Mark, I want to tell you something. He was a stranger. I didn't know him. He said, prison's going to be the beginning of your life, and you're going to find your true purpose in life with the journey you're ready to start. I ran back to the house and said, Ginger, there's somebody on the porch that's crazier than I am. She said, that can't be. First thing she said. And I said, he said, prison's going to be the beginning of my life, and I'm going to find my true purpose in life on this journey, Ian said. And she fell to her knees in tears. I'll never forget this day. She fell to her knees in tears, and she said, thank God, God sent somebody. She said, Mark, I've been praying for you for 10 years. For 10 years I've been praying for you. And your parents have been praying for you for decades. And you've never listened to me, to her, and never listened to them, and I pray you go out and listen to this man on the porch. And I went out and I said, Ian, what do you have in mind? He said he had a study called Operation Timothy. How many of you have ever heard of Operation Timothy? He said he had a study called Operation Timothy, and he was going to take me through it and introduce me to God and introduce me to Jesus. I said, I've been going to church for years with my wife. I already know who God is. And he said, Mark, you may know of God, but you don't know God. And you don't know Jesus. And I'm going to introduce you to him. And he started to spend 5, 6, 7 hours a week. He had 5 young children, his wife a lawyer, CFO of a pharmaceutical company. He was a busy man. He didn't have time to do this, but he did. God had him take time to mentor me and disciple me. So he's spending 5, 6, 7 hours a week with me for 7 months. And it started giving me hope. For the first time in a long time, I didn't want to take my own life. I started seeing some hope during that time. And then on my second week in prison, 7 months after Ian Howes' discipling me, a man named Chuck Colson showed up. Chuck Colson was the White House counsel for President Nixon that went to prison for the Watergate scandal when he was in his 40s, about my age. You know, he looked at how he was top of the world in politics when he was in his 30s, had an office right next to the Oval Office, White House counsel of a president, and he was in prison by the time he was 40, $20 a month. And he read about me in the Washington Post, and here's this guy, top of corporate America like me, in my 30s, and then in prison by the time you're 40, making $20 a month. So Chuck Colson started talking to me. I didn't even know who he was at that time, because Watergate happened to me when I was in high school. So I didn't even know who he was. And he said, Mark, I'm going to introduce you to God. I'm going to introduce you to Jesus. My second week in prison. I said, well, Ian Howes is already meeting me for 7 months, and he's discipling me, and I'm learning so much. He said, Mark, have you surrendered your life to Jesus? And I said, no. He said, Mark, Jesus died for your sins. He is the bridge to God. And I said, yeah, Ian's telling me all the same. He said, he died for you. He died a horrific death for you on a cross. And he was resurrected 3 days later. And Mark, the only way for redemption and for eternal life is for you to believe in Jesus, who is the bridge to God. And I said, the challenge I have with that, Chuck, I said, I want to believe that. And I have hope after being going through this for 7 months. But I said, the challenge I have with this is this. As a PhD scientist from Cornell University, I had professors tell me, if you believe in God, you can't be a scientist. It was all about Darwinism and evolution and Big Bang Theory. It was all about there is no God. I just can't erase 8 years of college. I can't erase it. That's my challenge. That's my only block from believing in God and believing in Jesus. He said, Mark, do you think there's a PhD scientist that believes in God? And I said, no. I don't think there's any scientist that can believe in God. And boy, did he start burying me with article after article and book after book. First article he sent me was from Albert Einstein. He said, only God could create man and only God could create the universe. I thought, well, Albert Einstein's a pretty smart guy. And then he started sending more articles and more books. I'll never forget the book he sent me in June of 98, 3 months after Chuck Colson's meeting with me. So this was after all I learned about Operation Timothy, but now he's kind of getting my science block out of the way. He sent me a book of a scientist in Minnesota that tried to prove to all his friends for 10 years that God did not exist, an atheist. And he studied and researched, and he wanted to be the man to prove that God does not exist. His name is Don Byerly. And he wrote a book called Surprised by Faith. After researching it for 10 years, he not only found that God does exist and Jesus is the Son of God. And I finished that book, 200 pages of evidence. And I got down on my knees on a concrete floor, 10 by 10, a locker and a roommate. And I got down on my knees the first time in my life and prayed and asked God for forgiveness and knowing that Jesus is the bridge to God. And asked for God to take this train wreck of my life that I made and to take this steering wheel and to guide my life. That's the first time I prayed, June 4th in 1998. When I surrendered my life to Jesus. Because I saw that some of the smartest scientists in the world believe in God. And there's a lot of evidence, scientific evidence, to support it. I just did not take the time to explore that in my life prior to that. So I became a Christian at age 40, 22 years ago in 1998. And I met Ginger in that visiting room that next weekend. It was my 3rd month in prison. And I blamed everybody in the world. I blamed the FBI for taking me undercover too long. I blamed ADM for getting me involved in the price-fixing case in the first place. I blamed everybody. And I walked out to Ginger and my 3 children. And I said, Ginger, I have nobody to blame but myself. There's only mistakes that were made were my own mistakes. And I asked her for forgiveness. The divorce rate, if you serve 5 years and longer, the official statistic, if you serve 5 years and longer, is 99% divorce rate, measured for 30 years by Prison Fellowship. 99% divorce rate. 5 years and longer, I served 8.5, and we're married for 40 years. Miracle of God. A miracle of God that we could survive this. Only God could make us survive this. So Ginger came and visited me every weekend with my kids. Then I got moved from Yazoo to Edgefield, South Carolina. Then she moved there with our kids there where she could visit me every weekend. Then with good behavior, you continue to move up. You move in corporate America, you move up the corporate ladder. In white-collar crime, you move up to a better prison with good behavior. Then I got to do my last 5 years at Pensacola, Florida Navy Base. The FBI helped me get there, which is kind of the number one place for white-collar crime. Try not to take notes on that. You don't need to remember all that. But we were at the Pensacola, Florida Navy Base my last 5 years, and Ginger and my kids moved there. And they visited every weekend. In the book, Against All Odds, that they added from prison records, that's the most recent book out of the 3 books called Against All Odds, they added from prison records how long Ginger spent in prison, and it added up to 3 years and 8 months, and she spent 8 hours a day in prison visiting rooms, 3 years and 8 months. Families can only come in Friday night and all day Saturday and all day Sunday, and she came every weekend for 8.5 years and moved to 3 different states to live next to my prisons. Miracle of God. 5 wives out of about 700 inmates came to visit, and Ginger was there every weekend. I don't take it lightly that my wife stayed with, that Ginger stayed with me, and my kids stayed with me. My kids are in the 30s now. Our youngest was 6 when I was wearing a wire. He heard the FBI say that I could be killed if I got exposed. He asked Ginger one day at age 6, he said, Mommy, does Dad come home today or they kill him today? Because he heard the FBI when they wired me up. He's 34 years old now. All of our kids in their 30s now. Even our oldest daughter's is 42. Ginger and I tried for 8 years to have our own kids, and the doctor said we ought to consider adopting, so we put her name on a list for baby, but it was a long time for an infant, like 4 or 5 year waiting list. But he said if you get older children, you can get them quicker. So we adopted a 5-year-old and 7-year-old. This was years ago, even before ADM. We adopted a 5-year-old and 7-year-old, and Ginger got pregnant 2 months later. So we had a 5-year-old, 7-year-old, and a newborn, all in about 10 months' time. Instant family. And those kids are stronger and closer than ever. God, not only did we survive, we thrived as a family. And I thank God for that, and there's not a day I don't get up that I thank God for taking my life from ashes to beauty. There's not a day I get up. I've been out for 14 years now, and there's not a day I don't thank God for that. So when the movie came out in 2009, the movie ended everybody going to prison. It doesn't have our faith journey. The director said, look, I'm not interested in faith. He was an atheist. He said, I want a crime drama, and I want to end it with everybody in prison. He said, I'm not looking for a redemption story. So it ends with everybody going to prison, me at age 40. But what I'm sharing with you tonight is kind of what some of the things has happened for the last 25 years. 25 years since that point. So when the movie came out in 2009, they had Ginger and I walk the red carpet with Matt Damon. You can see why they chose Matt Damon, my identical twin. See why they chose him. He and I look just alike, so that's why they chose him. Looked like his grandpa. But so we were walking the red carpet with him, got to talk to directors and so on. The director said, no, he didn't want anything faith in the movie. He just wanted a crime drama. That's what he was looking for. The faith journey's for someone else to do at another time. The FBI was so upset with the movie because it kind of had a comedic twist. They did a documentary to combat the movie. The FBI did. And that's on my website, markwhitacre.com, and it's by Discovery Channel. And if you watch that, it's got the 4 real FBI agents in it on Discovery Channel on my website. And it's got the prosecutor, all the real people. It's got Ginger and I. And people watch the documentary and they watch the movie and they say, wow, this is 2 different stories. So Hollywood, they look for entertainment and stuff. But it did give us a platform to go share. I never was asked one time to speak anywhere until that movie trailer came out in 2009. And like I said, I've been doing 7 or 8 events a month ever since then, since 2009. So when the movie came out, Ginger was interviewing with CBS News in New York. I was at an interview in California during that time. Both of us interviewing 2 different places. Ginger's on national TV at CBS News, and she's kind of shy. She doesn't like the limelight. And they asked her, he said, Ginger, how'd you do it? 99% divorce rate, how'd you do it on national TV in 2009? And Ginger said, you know what? God told me to love him even when I didn't love him. God told me to stay with him when I wanted to run as fast as I can. God told me to love him unconditionally when I didn't want to. She said, because of God telling me that, divorce was not an option. She said murder was an option. She considered it twice, but divorce wasn't an option. Then they asked her right on national news, they said, well, Ginger, when did you want to kill him? When is the most you were upset with him? She said, when he took a 6-month plea agreement and ripped it up in my face and said it was all her fault I'm involved with that case, she wanted to kill me. Then they asked her the question. They said, what would have happened if your husband signed that 6-month sentence? She said, looking back all those decades, I know now my husband would have came out the same greedy man he came in with a 6-month sentence. He would have never listened to Chuck Colson. He would have never listened to Ian Howes of CBMC. He would have never been discipled with a 6-month sentence because all he would have known, hey, I'm out of here in 6 months. But 9 years of prison, God gave him exactly what he needed. I wish she would have said 2 years would have been enough. But I do agree with her, 6 months would not have been enough during that time. So I'm getting out of prison in 2006, 14 years ago. Cornell University, a couple of those professors became Christians and started visiting me in prison. They brought biotech companies and pharmaceutical companies to meet me in prison, just like a college recruiting ground. And they had 4 offers for me the day I got out of prison. 4 offers. Now, you don't start off the head of finance when you're involved with a $1 billion price fixing scheme. You don't start off the head of finance when you're involved with white-collar crime. But as a PhD biochemist, they had me hired by a cancer research company. And I worked for that cancer research company for 10 years. I'm on their board today, and the advisory board. And I became the COO, the number 2 executive of that company. Miracle of God. God gave me a second chance. And then CBMC's had such an impact on my life. I started speaking at all these prayer breakfasts. And then I went on national staff for CBMC for almost 7 years and became the COO for the last 3 years of that. And then January, if God doesn't have more of a sense of humor, since January, the people that was the largest victim in the price fixing scheme was Coca-Cola. They won in $3 billion back. They won $3 billion back. Coca-Cola won $400 million alone out of all the companies that won. The victims won $3 billion in class action suits. Coca-Cola was paid $400 million. And I work for them today since last month. I'm an executive director, heading up a division, heading up an initiative called T-Factor, which we equip CEOs how to integrate their faith in their work and to have a faith-friendly environment. A miracle of God that I would work for the company that I stole from. In T-Factor, we have 102 plants. We have a chaplain in every plant. We have chaplains at our headquarters. We have prayer groups. We pray at all of our meetings. You walk in our headquarters, the entire wall says our only purpose is to honor God in all we do. It's like CBMC within a large corporation. It's an amazing journey, and only God could create that position. And not only do I work for Coca-Cola today, and we have partners like Corporate Chaplains of America, for example. Like I said, 102 plants, we have a chaplain at every plant. It's been a great partnership. For 25 years, we've had that partnership. And not only did I end up start working for Coca-Cola, when I went to prison, Ginger was about ready to move at home with our 3 children, with her mom, because we were running out of money. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees, $9 million in fines. We had to sell the house and cars to pay attorneys. We were running out of money when I went to prison. If I would have taken a 6-month sentence, I would have Ginger very financially stable. But to go 9 years in prison at $20 a month, and to have all the lawyers that I had involved, I ended up eventually having 11 lawyers involved during that 3 years. We were broke. She was about ready to move back at home with our 3 children, with her mom. She got a call in August of 98. I went to prison in March of 98. I got on my knees starting in June of 98, surrendered my life to Jesus. I said, God, I'm $20 a month for the next 9 years. How can you take care of Ginger? I can't do it. Ginger got a call in August of 98, and a lawyer on the phone named Ken Adams said he represented Coca-Cola and Kraft and Tyson Foods and Pillsbury, Lipton Tea, and all the companies that buy the ADM ingredients. And they won $3 billion, and he said Coca-Cola won $400 million, and said, we're going to finance Ginger and your kids while your husband's in prison for 9 years. They said, we're going to give you a whistleblower reward, Ginger, and finance your entire time while your husband's in prison because you turned him in and stopped the case that was going on for 12 years. The people I stole from and the people that I work for now took care of Ginger for the 8.5 years I was in prison. Miracle of God. Only God could have done this. So I don't take it lightly to get employed, my family to stay with me, now to work for the people that was the biggest victim in this price-fixing scheme, and to be able to do work to equip other leaders to carry out their faith and integrate their faith in their work. I don't take it lightly. And the thing I don't take the most lightly, the thing I take the most serious in my life is that God had Ginger stay with me during the 3 years undercover, 9 years in a prison, 99% of the wives running as fast as they can, and she stayed. Miracle of God. So with that, I'm going to bring Ginger up here because my story is really about her. Ginger, come on up. And by the And by the way, she told me this morning murder was still on the table.
Every day, every day. The FBI assured me that they would dispose of his body. So I feel pretty comfortable that God had a plan, and so, yeah. But no, he gives me more credit than I deserve. It is only by God's grace and glory that we were able to get through this. So that none of the strength, nothing that I did was on my own fruition. It was by God. He had a whole plan of what he wanted to do, and he just happened to choose us to go down that journey. So, but he makes me sound really good, which is not true.
We're going to open this up. Any questions you may have, no matter how personal. We really want to share. There'll be a time that age-wise and stuff that we won't be able to share. And we feel, Chuck Colson did, for example, let you know, he did 38 events at age 80, passed out on stage sharing his testimony, went to the hospital and passed away 8 years ago at age 80. And I tell you, Ginger and I feel the same. We feel we're going to share God taking our life from ashes to beauty until he brings us home. And we're 62 and 61 now. She don't like me to tell her age, but she's 61. I'm an informant. I tell things.
He will be the guy in the nursing home telling everybody this story. I'm just telling you.
They all think I'm just making it all up. They will. But who wore a wire for 3 years and all
He'll
that.
meet his new friend the next day and tell him the same story over and over. So when he says he'll never stop telling the story, he will definitely. This will be over and over. But yeah, if there's anything that I guess one thing I wanted to say, you didn't explain the why it ended up being 3 years. It opened up 11 more cases, Mark's recording. So when he was recording things, ADM would tell more crimes. They would brag about more crimes, more areas they were price fixing, or if they were stealing something or something they had done. So that's how it ended up being from 6 weeks to 3 years. They just kept saying more crimes, which meant another case, which meant more tapes, which meant so much more. We just wanted them to be quiet, no more crimes. But hey, yes, sir.
Did you have any validated threats on your lives that you are confirmed, instances?
Yes, we did. After they found out that Mark was the informant, we had this was a long time ago, so it's old. Some of you may not even remember, just the little mini cassette recorders that were your answering machine. And it wasn't someone from ADM that we could trace back, but had said, we're going to make you wish that you were never born, meaning Mark, and that you would never make it to trial.
Yeah.
And so that was,
They follow our kids. And
they hired a company out of New York, and they bugged our phones, went through our trash. These big black SUVs followed the school buses. I mean, they did everything they could to intimidate us because they wanted Mark. They really wanted Mark to kill himself, because if he wasn't there, then they would not be able to proceed with the case.
they weren't allowed to use the tapes in court unless I sit in court to verify them.
So they did everything they could. They sued every one of our parents, friends, anybody we'd ever written a check to. I mean, they just tried to really destroy our life.
We do a $100 gift to a birthday gift for a parent or a cousin. They would sue them just to try to make family split up from us. But it's amazing our family got so much behind us.
Because they said, you were working for the FBI when you were working for us. So, you took money from us when really you were working for the FBI. They were trying all kinds of things, but it clearly didn't work. It didn't break up our family, and it didn't break up our extended family.
So other than that interaction, did you have any interaction with the other people who wound up going to jail, or did they go to jail, and did they die in jail?
Everybody went to jail. For sure, everybody went to jail. Yeah, the question was, have I had any? Did the others go to jail? The other defendants and from the other companies, plus the other 4 at ADM. Yes, we all did go to jail. Then the question was there any interaction with them? One of them became a Christian, one of the 4 at ADM, and he took Ginger and I 4 or 5 years ago to lunch, hugged me, and thanked me for turning him in. He became a Christian in prison. He said it's the best thing in the world ever happened to him. He said he had the same greed addiction that I had. And another one was in Europe. This is a really crazy story. It's 2014 Herald, and some of them saw them at the CBMC World Convention. They had me on stage with him. He was number 3 executive at Hoffman the Roach with 80,000 executives, and he at number 3. He admits that he was talking to hitmen to have me killed before the trial, to have me killed. He was admitting that he was talking to hitmen. He became a Christian during the journey, during prison, and became the president of CBMC in Europe. And he hugged me and thanked me on stage in 2014. And it was wanting to kill me 25 years ago.
It's amazing.
And a lot of people saw that at the World Convention 2014.
Some were bitter and ended up dying bitter men.
The ones that came out better seemed like had God in their life, and some came out bitter. Surely. Question was, how are things with ADM, with me out sharing the story so often, 7 or 8 times a month? For one, ADM's a whole different company. The ones who went to prison, the 4 of us went to prison. They hired 1 woman to replace the 4 of us. That's one thing. And she turned that company around, and it became even larger. It went from the 56th largest company to the 41st largest company in America on the Fortune 500. And she was the head of compliance at Chevron. So when you got a compliance and ethics and problem, you go hire the best you can get for compliance and ethics. And that's who they hired to replace us. And she turned that company around to a wonderful company. So they're a whole different company. When I share this story, it's not about the 30,000 people going to work doing the right thing every day. It was about 4 executives, me included, that were part of all this selfishness and self-centeredness and part of these crimes. Yeah, I became a Christian in June of '98. In August of '98, I prayed during my quiet time. I said, God, Ian Howes and Chuck Colson said I'm going to find my purpose in my life. What can be my purpose? And I've got 8 more years of prison to do. I became a Christian my 3rd month in prison. And I looked at that Bible that Chuck Colson gave me during my quiet time and the Operation Timothy books that Ian Howes gave me. And I started discipling guys one by one. And I took 61 guys that actually finished and being Christian. I took even more started with, but 61 guys that finished Operation Timothy and started taking other ones through it, 61 through the 8.5 years in prison through Operation Timothy. And I have 4 I'm taking through it now, and these 4 make 87 people that I'm taking through Operation Timothy in the last 22 years. Those 8.5 years in prison became the most productive years of my life because God showed me how to disciple others. Where in the world are people more hopeless and helpless than prison? What a great idea. And they had 24 hours of free time a day. I mean, some of them would just do it because they had nothing else to do. But you still get to plant that seed, and a lot of them became Christians. They just started off looking for something to do, but they get to know about God, and they get to know Jesus and surrender their lives to Jesus. The most productive years in my life, helped them get their GEDs, learn how to read, learn how to write. And I tell you something, that was the first time in my life that I helped somebody else besides myself. Was in federal prison at $20 a month. Most productive years of my life.
There were also lots of men that poured into Mark. There were lots of really strong Christian men there that had just made poor choices. So it was great, too, that there were men that were so knowledgeable of the Bible and had been raised in really good homes that they poured into Mark since he was a new Christian. So it was an awesome experience.
I needed that experience. I don't know if I need 9 years of it, but I needed that experience for sure.
Yes,
I needed that brokenness.
Your boldness is inspirational, and just your faith is amazing to me, and I'm sure everybody in the room. I'm just wondering, what is your background in a relationship with Christ look to get such a deep connection? Were you always Christian throughout your whole life? Or?
No, actually, I wasn't. I was saved when I was 13. My parents believed in God, but really didn't ever go to church or anything like that. So I believed young, but kind of was more of a head knowledge, not a heart knowledge. It was later in life when we, actually really more so when we moved to Moweaqua and I became involved in the church there. That's really kind of when it, I always say my flame was ignited again. It had kind of been smoldering, but the boldness was not typical of me. I mean, 30 years ago, I would have never come to this event, let alone walk up on this stage. I was extremely shy, and I think that's what shocked Mark is that this boldness came from the Holy Spirit. It really wasn't anything about me. I would have never said to him, I'm going to turn you in. That is way out of my comfort zone and nothing I would have ever said. But I think it was that God knew also that Mark was carrying this burden. I saw the burden, but God also knew that the burden that was on Mark's heart, and so he just used me, and also used me just to step out and to be bolder. It took me from being this quiet, shy mother of three to somebody that had to help him through 3 years of undercover, which was probably the most stressful thing in my life. Prison was easy compared to 3 years of undercover, worrying every day if he's going to come home. And because then what would I tell my kids? I made your dad turn himself in, and now he's dead, or how would I tell his parents? You know, what would I say? And so for 3 years for me, it was just constant praying, because I couldn't tell anybody what Mark was doing. I couldn't share with my sister, my mom, my sisters in Christ. I could tell no one. Yet all I did was spend my day wondering, is he going to come home? And so I think God was using me to just like, you've got to be bolder in your just general life. You can't just be hiding here, even before this all started. And so it has forced me to, I had to become the breadwinner, which was crazy, going from somebody that was a 7-figure salary to a first-year teacher, making $27,000 a year. So I think it was just a process. It was nothing that was me. Definitely it was the Holy Spirit, because I would never have gone up against him. And I could have come down and said, hey, I'm going to turn you in. And he could have said, sure, go ahead. You don't know nothing. You don't work there. You could be crazy as a loon. I mean, I could have been locked up in the loony bin, because I didn't really have any firsthand knowledge. So I think it was really Mark wanted to be out of this, but he didn't know how to do it. He didn't know how to separate himself from the greed. He needed somebody else, and so I became his, I hate to say scapegoat, but somebody that kind of prodded him to really, this wasn't what he wanted to do. We had come from an ethical German company. This was just not typical. So that's where the boldness came from. I give it, all the credit to God. It was nothing me. He just used me.
I remember the first month that I was with ADM and moved her from Germany. We lived in our mansion and flying around on a jet. And the first time she met one of the executives there, the president came to a little place looking for things for his grandkids. He was 69. The CEO was 75 and the president was 69. This was the president. And Ginger and I were there. It was the first month, and we were shopping for our 4-year-old son at that time, and buying clothes for him. And so I got to introduce her to the president. Usually you'd say what you're doing for the community, doing for society. And he came to Ginger and he pointed out a yellow Ferrari out on the sidewalk. It was a ground floor, kind of like this, and you look out the glass window there, kind of a ground floor parking lot. And he said, that's his yellow Ferrari. Said he had 14 of those, and said he was going to make her husband a very rich man. And he walked away, and Ginger looked at me and she said, I think we've made the worst mistake we've ever made in our lives. She said, the hair on the back of my neck is standing up. And that was her first month. And I was so excited he said that. I wanted to go hug him and I said, man, we're at the right place. I can't imagine being anywhere else. And she's thinking to make the biggest mistake we ever made in our lives. So that's how the different perspective we had even that first month there. When someone said he's going to make me a very rich man, I wanted to high-five him right there.
It's because he didn't ask anything. Like, how do you like where you live? Are your kids adjusting? How, is it a tough move from Germany to the central Illinois? It was so greed focused. He was just all about the toys that he had. And I thought, you have 14 of those? Like, it's just wasteful. It's just so wasteful.
Our 4-year-old just thought it was like a Tonka toy out there or something.
You mentioned the divorce rate in prison. Do you guys mentor other couples going through what you've experienced? And have you written a book? Do you plan to write a book?
We hired a ghostwriter to write our book. It's called Against All Odds, but we approved every line. We're just not the best writers, so we hired someone to do it. It came out in 2010. So we wrote a book with our story. It's the authorized biography, and it kind of first half is like the movie, the whole crime drama, but then it has the last couple decades also our faith journey. So it has everything we're sharing here tonight. So we have done a book. And we do disciple a lot of people. Lots of people reach out to us that are going through prison. And because of Chuck Colson come a day per month for all those years for me, for 14 years since I've been out, I've been going a day per month. And right now the guy I'm discipling through Operation Timothy is a medical doctor in federal prison. I go one Saturday a month because I can't imagine not going back there after what people did for me when I was in prison.
And the divorce rate is so high because all of a sudden you're now the breadwinner, and the men have it easy. Like Mark had it easy. He had 24 hours to do nothing. I mean, that's all he had to do. He had food, he had water, I know it's prison, but it's different for the spouse because now you're in charge of the children, you're in charge of your working, and the BOP is very good. I hope there's no one here from the BOP at putting you so far away from your family. That's kind of an extra punishment. So a lot of these women can't afford to make the drives and pay the hotel. So that's why the divorce rate is so high, one of the reasons. Another is the relationship before they get to prison. You know, they've burned a lot of bridges before they get there, and so they expect all of a sudden people to stick by them when it's tough. It's a whole different world that I wish we'd never experienced, but God had us go through there. And I do talk to a lot of wives while their husbands in the trial process are waiting to go to prison, to give them an idea of what to expect and, you know, to pray for them to be faithful and stay if that's what God leads them to do. But it's very hard on the spouse that's left behind. It's almost as if the spouse and the children are the ones that are being punished because they're having to deal with a lot of things every single day, and their day becomes kind of routine. So
On
it's
that
unfortunate.
date, on November 5th, 92, the day that she forced me to confess to the FBI, when she was telling me that I was an addict to my work, she said, I don't even think you know the grades of our 3 children. I said, oh, that's nonsense. And I rattled all 3 off, and I got 1 right out of 3. I didn't even know the grades of my kids.
He still doesn't know their ages because he keeps telling them wrong today. We have one that's 34, one that's 40, and one that's 42. One to be so they're not all in their 30s anymore. We did get them all in 1 year. That's
Got
true.
them all in 1 year.
And moved to Germany. And I always say 1985, God was preparing me for 1995 with him because I'm like, if you can adopt 2 kids, find out you're pregnant, move to Germany, and give birth in a foreign country, I can handle ADM and I guess all the other things. But he doesn't. He's so good with numbers, but the kids, he doesn't want them to grow up. That's why he keeps them in their 30s.
I want them all to be 10.
Yes, yes.
But I got to know my kids those 20 hours a weekend in prison like I never knew them before. Because I had no distract, no TV, no cell phone, no computer. So when they're spending with me in those visiting hours, they've had my attention for the first time in my life. I really got to know my kids in prison. Yeah, she became those funds that came from those companies, that whistleblower reward that Coca-Cola and 11 companies put together for Ginger to finance her while I was in prison. She put our kids through school, put our kids through college for that, bought a small house, bought a Ford Fusion, the things you do just to raise the family and get through those 8.5 years. And she became, also with those funds, became a school teacher at age 40, went back to college, and she became the teacher of the year of her whole city in 2007. Teacher of the year. It was remarkable.
It's finding
what
your
she went
passion.
through.
I loved teaching kindergarten, so it was a good distraction from all of the other chaos in life. So yes, sir.
Yeah, Mark told the story before about you were in school teaching and shared a little something.
Yeah, I should share that. I'm going to share this story. I was in prison, and there was this little boy, and we moved to Pensacola. It's when I got to the Navy base. Like I said, the number one prison on the Forbes list. And they do have a Forbes prison list, by the way. If you Google Forbes and prisons, they rank them. So she's our first couple weeks at this school at Pensacola, and the principal's kind of observing her because that's what happens when you're a new teacher and they want to see how she's doing. First couple weeks, and there was kindergarten, there was this 5-year-old that caused all this kind of ruckus and all this stuff, and the principal's sitting in the back, and Ginger says, I'm going to have to contact your mom. She said, well, my mom don't even live with me. She said, well, I'm going to contact your dad because they have called a red light when you're bad, green, yellow, red, putting you to the red light. You're being bad here today. And the little boy said, you can't call my dad. My dad's in prison. And Ginger looked at,
My dad's in prison down the road.
yeah.
And I taught down the road from his
Yeah. So Ginger looked at that little boy and said, or that little boy told his friend, said, if that she said, good, your dad's in prison, my husband's in prison, I visit him every weekend. And I'll see him this weekend, I'll see your dad. And that little boy told his other kids, if her husband's in prison, I'm not messing with that lady. And Ginger said she became the best student of that class. But afterwards, the principal came up to Ginger and said, why'd you lie to that kid? Why'd you tell that wild story? And Ginger said, well, my husband is in prison. I will visit him this weekend.
And he wasn't the only one. One time in the visiting room, we were sitting there with our kids, and 2 little brother-sisters come in, and they're like, Miss Whitacre, what are you doing here? And I'm like, oh, okay. They were visiting their father. And so Like, you know, you have different, God puts you in different places, and I think he chose that school. It was an inner city school with lots of children at the federal camp, and so it worked out.
Considering you wore water for 3 years, you risked your life, I would have thought you would qualify for the witness protection program.
They considered that, you know, you ask about the they did talk to us about the witness protection program when things happened, but you're never allowed to see your parents again, never allowed to see your brothers and sisters again, and we didn't want to go that route. You go to a prison under a different name, you come out under a different name. We decided we're going to take the risk where we can see our family and never be separated from our family for life. But they talked to us about that as an option during that time.
Ginger, you mentioned that with the divorce rate being so high, and it typically, you know, there's burn bridges before
Right.
the prison sentence. It would appear that there was probably some burn bridges along the way before Mark went to prison. In the burden of having to take care of his family, did you ever feel resentment towards Mark? How did you move through that, and how did you extend forgiveness and grace in a way that's to reflect that?
He asked me if I ever had any anger issues towards Mark, and how did I forgive him and give grace to him for all the things, because it was tough. I mean, I have to say, the Mark that's up here on the stage, he's a great guy. But if you'd met the ADM Mark, none of you would have liked him. He was all about him. This whole stage would have been about him. I mean, and it's, so it was really difficult. I didn't like the person he was becoming at ADM. We battled over his spending, but it was his money. And then tearing up the deal, definitely not a good day, not hard to like him then when he blames me. And then the suicide attempt was probably one of the hardest things that it took for me to forgive him for. Because I thought, why? You're so chicken, you don't want to go to prison, but you have no problem leaving me here with the kids. And I still have to deal with all of this, and you are going to take the easy way out. He didn't get a chance to tell today how God changed that plan, because he, and I'll come back to how I gave him grace, but on the day that he attempted suicide, we had a gardener at that time, and we weren't anywhere, we were living with my mom, and the gardener came at 8 o'clock every day, not 7:59,
For 8
not
years.
8, and not 8:01, 8 o'clock every single day, like clockwork. But that morning, he felt he needed to go to the house for some reason. He didn't know why. And he is the one that found Mark. If he had come at his regular time, Mark would not be standing here. But God had a different plan, and he was not going to let Mark do the choosing of when he was going to leave this earth. So that for a while, that was probably one of the hardest things for me to forgive him for. The other things I understood were under stress, greed. That was his addiction, versus and ADM knew it. ADM knew that he wasn't into drugs or alcohol or women or whatever. They knew he was greed-focused, and so that's why they kept giving him more perks and bonuses, because they knew that was the way to keep him, focused. So, it's very tough. It's tough to forgive somebody when they want to take their life. I can forgive other things, but it was easiest when he became a Christian, when he finally took responsibility, because for the undercover, it was my fault. The trial, it was the FBI's fault, the lawyer's fault. It was everybody else's fault. But when he gave his life to Christ, he had to take responsibility. Nobody made any of these bad decisions. No one forced him into working in the cartel. Nobody. He did that himself. So I think grace for both of us, it's back and forth. We have our good days and we have our bad days.
She's so blessed I've stayed with her.
Yeah, see?
so blessed.
Okay, that is old Mark right there. That's ADM Mark, yeah. So imagine that on an everyday 10-times scale. I'm so lucky to have experienced
Divorce
all
is
of
not
it.
an option, but murder is, and I think about it every morning.
Yeah. So, but I think if he had not been saved, I'm not sure we would be standing here on this stage. I mean, our marriage would have crumbled, because he would have continued for 8.5 years of just moaning, and I don't know that I could have done that. I say that now. So I'm so grateful for CBMC and Ian Howes that stepped out in faith and knocked on our door when they didn't know us from Adam. God sent him, and I know Ian says he felt the nudge for Chuck Colson, just for all of CBMC. I mean, Harold and Herman and Brian, all these people that pour into Mark's life continually. I mean, it has been an amazing journey through CBMC. I have to say that. We're blessed with Coca-Cola, and it's wonderful, but CBMC has really impacted our life beyond measure.
How did your family, your parents, and your extended family, how did they respond with all of this?
I tell you, my parents and Ginger's parents, I think Ginger's parents would have left her if she would have split up with me. I mean, it's amazing how close. They put me as their executor of their will even when I was in prison. And my parents backed me up tremendously. But I will say this, my mom, 87 years old now, and the only child to go to college, especially 8 years for PhD. I think my mom's probably the only person that says, boy, I'm more proud of my son going 8.5 years in prison than 8 years of college. 8 years of college took him away from God. 8 years of prison brought him to his knees to God. So they really are excited about the journey that some people takes brokenness, and in my case, it took brokenness to get there. But they supported us the entire time, her parents and my parents. Very encouraged all of our families during that
My
time.
mom loved him. I need to explain that because I don't want you to think like I'm a bad person that my mom would choose him. But there are 3 children, and my mom absolutely loved him better than her own 3 children. I mean, she just loved him because he's a yes guy. And seriously, my mom passed away, and we get her will, and he was the executor, and it was designated while he was in prison. I'm like, Mom, how could you do that over your own 3 children?
But I had her on tape on some
Yeah,
stuff. So I had her. I taped everybody.
He thinks it's funny. It's very heartbreaking to me that my mom did that. I'm like, what in the world, But no, my mom wrote him every single week in prison.
She did.
Every single week. So
She did.
that's how much she loved him.
As a mom, what was that moment like? What were those conversations like with your kids to keep you guys so united and for your kids to remain as strong as they are and confident today?
Well, they were typical teenagers. Our daughter was a freshman in college, so for her, it was an easy escape. She could just stay at school and not really be involved in all this kind of drama, even going to prison. So she stayed in North Carolina and went to school even when we moved. Our boys, we made the pact that if we could afford it, we would move. If he got moved at the time, we didn't know it, that he would be moved so many times, so that the boys could see him every weekend. You get 300 minutes to talk by phone
Per month.
So, as the mathematician, 10 minutes a day. And there's things that boys don't want to talk on the phone with their dad. They need the face-to-face. And he needed to rebuild the relationship with them. He didn't have that. He didn't know what grade they were in. He wasn't involved in their life. So it was important they'd have a lot of face-to-face. But they still had their, our kids still all had all kinds of bumps in the road. Believe me, there was nothing that, they were typical teenagers and kids. Now they are grown up, and it's a whole lot different. But it was hard. Nobody wants to move. Our daughter moved in her senior year. Our youngest moved in his senior year. He missed, our middle child has some learning disabilities, so Mark had just gone to prison when it was his high school graduation, which for him, he had taken the exit exam 5 times just to be able to pass to graduate, and Mark wasn't there. So there needed to be a lot of healing during those prison visits. And it's tough. There was lots of crying and anger when we're saying we're going to pick up and move. But it always worked out for the best. I mean, the best was Pensacola. Our kids all did well living there.
But our youngest was 6 when I started
whole
wearing a
life.
wire, and he was 12. And it was definitely harder on him, being as young as he was. He was 12 when I went to prison. He's 34 now, and I took him through Operation Timothy when he was 27. He's got his own Timothys now and had a few Timothys along the way now, so from age 27 to 34. And I'll never forget when he got in front of a small group and presented his testimony outside of Cincinnati. And I never forget where he started. This is about 18 months ago, or 2 years ago. And he stood up and he said, "Thank God my dad went to prison. I got to spend 20 hours a weekend with him, and I got to know my dad in prison." And how blessed he was to have that. So to think about how God touched his heart to forgive me where he felt blessed to know me in prison is a miracle in itself.
If he'd stayed working at ADM, our kids would have been beyond spoiled. I mean, they would have just never been able to function on their own, I don't think, with that kind of money and lifestyle. It was just, even though I tried to keep everybody grounded, he would still give them things that were just beyond crazy. So then when it's my responsibility, there's nothing to give. It's was very tough, but the wounds have been healed. There was, it's tough. And granted, our 2 older kids were adopted. They'd already been in foster care 2.5 years, so I felt like they'd already endured enough in life. They didn't really need to go through their dad going through prison, but it has made them really strong, compassionate people.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Time-wise, I just want to be respectful of time-wise. Tyler, are you trying, what side? 1 or 2 more questions? Yes. About my activity with CBMC?
The growth.
Yeah, I've been involved with CBMC for 22 years, discipling guys, and I was 7 years on the national staff just until the end of 2019. And we started what's called a Vision 650, and we started that 3 years ago when I became the COO of CBMC. And Vision 650 was basically to double the number of cities that CBMC's in 10 years compared to where they're at now, which means to add like 40 cities a year. And over the last 2 years, we started that throughout of all 2018 and all of 2019. It's continuing today. And we added 79 cities in the last 2 years, 79 cities where CBMC did not exist today in the last 2 years. So 40 cities a year will get it in 8 more years to 650 cities that CBMC's in. And it's a miracle. It's a great ministry. I love it. I feel like within Coca-Cola, I'm doing CBMC within Coca-Cola Consolidated. And like I said, I still lead my 2 Connect 3 teams. I still have my Timothys. I could not imagine once a CBMCer is always a CBMCer. But it's such a great place for discipleship and a great place to really help a man understand their purpose of their life is evangelism and discipleship. Matthew 28:19, evangelism, and 2 Timothy 2:2, where Paul told Timothy, take these things you learned from me and go share with others. That's what the DNA of CBMC is. And I personally think if I had to put the purpose of my life, no matter where I work, even at Coca-Cola Consolidated, I feel the purpose of my life are those 2 scriptures, Matthew 28:19 and 2 Timothy 2:2, which is one-on-one discipleship. Disciple others, basically planting seeds to the lost and the unconvinced, and then once they do know God, discipling them to help them become the men that God designed them to be. And I'm so blessed to be a part of that. And I believe that's the purpose of all of our lives, really. I believe that.
I'm glad to hear our slogan in 1980 was 80 and 80. I'm glad we almost made it. We did 79.
We did that in 2 years, 79.
That was our goal in 1980.
Wow. We'll do that 2 years now. God's at work.
Yeah, you were a 3D scientist, and so I was kind of curious. Say you gave to somebody who meets your match, if you will. How do you think the Lord would move you to engage with that person to make a difference?
So
Or maybe even if I did or someone else, is there anything that could have been said that might have made a difference?
You mean to me during the time,
Yes.
like I was in college or my working career?
Yes.
I don't think so. I think if Ian Howes would have reached out to me then, or a Chuck Colson, I don't think I would have listened to them. I do believe if I would have had some professors back then, I started Cornell when I was 22, finished when I was 25. I do believe if I had some professors that were saying, hey, there's some other research besides Darwinism and Big Bang Theory and evolution that God created the earth and God created the universe. I never heard the whole creation. I do think that could have made a difference during my time educating. In other words, like if I went to a Christian college and heard about creation. I just never heard that. All I heard was evolution, Darwinism, and the Big Bang Theory. So that could have made a difference, I think, in my youth. So I'm in college and I'm hearing this from professors that some of them are up for Nobel Prizes in an Ivy League school, and they're saying if you believe in God, you can't be a scientist. And I'm thinking my parents are Christians and they didn't go to college. That's what I started thinking. When I would have conversations with my friends at Cornell, I'd say, yeah, my parents are Christians. They didn't go to college. That's what my thought pattern was at age 22 during that time. Totally wrong, but that's where I was.
I think that's why God calls us to be bolder in talking about our faith and sharing our faith, because if someone, and I was just thinking, there was a gentleman when we lived in St. Louis, an older man, Art Schmidt, that I think God put in our path, but we didn't take advantage of it until he reconnected when Mark was going through the trial and just prayed over us. And I'm thinking, gosh, we should have listened more, maybe if Art had been a little bolder. And so I encourage all of you to be bolder like Ian Howes was, and just step out and pray for people, and just step out and let them know that there is another choice.
And Ian was bold. I remember the first couple of months I'm sitting with him, going through Operation Timothy with him, and I'd say, I still don't know if I get this. I still think I'm going to kill myself before I go to prison. He said, you may kill yourself tomorrow, but we're going to keep talking about God today. I mean, he was bold. He was bold. Oh, what a blessing to have these guys in our lives. And we all need that. We all need that. Thank you very much. Thank you. God bless all of you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
That was hot mic. That was incredible. Thank you guys so much for being here and being so willing to share your story. I just think it's so important for us to remember that we don't know what God has planned for us. He might send us to prison. He might not, but He's working in our lives no matter what. And it's just our responsibility to be obedient and then allow Him to work. And He can do incredible things, just as we've heard from the Whitacres here. So thank you guys so much for being obedient and allowing us to hear your story and learn more about our Lord via you. So thank you. Also, this year at our Metro Prayer Breakfast, our speaker will be CEO of Coca-Cola Consolidated, actually, Frank Harrison. So that's going to be a very powerful story as well. I encourage you to join us for that if you haven't already. And we're looking forward to another great year of the Metro Prayer Breakfast in April. So I wanted to give a little bit more information about CBMC. If you're involved in any of our teams or peer groups or YP, anything like that, would you mind standing up just real quick for me, please? So first of all, I want to say thank you. Thank you for devoting your lives and being a part of CBMC and helping the next generations come alongside you. Brent gave a great talk this morning about a barrel of monkeys. And it was a great illustration of, God made us to be the monkey with two arms, where we're being dragged along by somebody, we're being taught and mentored, but we're also doing that with somebody else. And I think this is what those guys are doing. If you want to get involved with CBMC, those gentlemen that stood up just now would definitely love to answer your questions. And I'm here as well. And I've only been on the job for 3 months, but I will do my best to answer your questions. And ladies, we don't forget about you. Melissa Liba and Wendy Jordan are here tonight, and they are involved with Community of Christian Business Women. So it's the same kind of heart of CBMC with a little bit of twist for the women. They meet on the second Monday every month at noon and the last Monday at 6 p.m. All their meetings are at CEC on Memorial and Meridian. Let me pray, and we'll get out of here and go to bed. Dear Heavenly Father God, just thank you so much for today. Thank you for this opportunity to just come and hear an incredible story that is your story, Lord. And we're just so grateful for men like Mark who are paying it forward and committing their lives to discipling other men and to know you more and to be more like you. So God, I just thank you so much for every person in this room, for every couple represented here tonight, Lord, and we just thank you again for this opportunity. We thank you and we love you. Amen.